The snow fell without mercy that night, covering the mountains of Hanul village in endless white. Wind whistled through the narrow alleys, rattling the wooden shutters of old homes. Inside one of them, a small hanok tucked at the edge of the forest. Kim Hwa-ja sat close to her fire, her wrinkled hands knitting slowly as the flames flickered against her face. Outside, the world was swallowed by silence, the kind that feels heavy, like it's pressing against your chest. Her kettle hissed softly on the stove. On the wall hung a framed photograph of her late husband, smiling in his old army uniform. She glanced at it often. The house had never felt this big since he'd been gone. Her grown children lived far away in Seoul, busy with lives that rarely had space for phone calls. In the quiet, she sometimes spoke to the wind, just to hear a voice. Tonight, even that felt distant. The snow thickened, tapping at the windows like fingers asking to come in. Hwa-ja folded her knitting, closed her eyes, and whispered, "May no one be left out in this cold." She didn't know that prayer would soon find its answer, in a way she could never imagine. The wind howled louder as night deepened, and the fire cracked beneath Hwa-ja's trembling hands. Suddenly, bang! 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 3 hard knocks echoed through her wooden door, sharp enough to make her heart leap. She froze. No one ever came by at this hour, especially not in weather like this. Clutching her shawl tight around her shoulders, she shuffled toward the door. Her mind whispered warnings. What if it's trouble? What if it's someone dangerous? But another voice, quieter and warmer, urged her forward. When she opened the door, a gust of icy wind swept in, carrying snow that glittered under the faint lamplight. Standing there were 15 men, their faces red from the cold, leather jackets stiff with frost. Their motorcycles were half buried in the snow behind them, metal glinting dully beneath the storm. At their front stood Choi Tae-hyun, tall and broad-shouldered, his head bowed slightly in respect. "Ajumeoni," he said, voice rough but polite. "We were caught in the snow. The road's closed. Could we stay just until it passes?" Hwa-ja's heart pounded. Every instinct told her to be cautious. These men looked rough, strangers from the city. But when she looked closer, she saw their lips trembling, hands stiff, and eyes full of exhaustion, not danger. She stepped aside slowly, her voice gentle. "Come in before you freeze." For a moment none of them moved. Then Tae-hyun nodded once, and one by one, the men entered, bringing the storm, the smell of gasoline, and a strange sense that something extraordinary was about to unfold inside her tiny home. The air inside the house filled with steam and the faint scent of melting snow. Water dripped from the bikers' jackets, pooling near the door as they removed their gloves and boots, careful not to dirty the floor. The small room felt suddenly alive. 15 men trying to fit into a space built for one. Hwa-ja moved quickly, her old joints protesting but her heart steady. She lit another burner, pulled rice from the cupboard, and reheated a pot of kimchi jjigae she'd made earlier. The savory aroma filled the air, chasing away the cold. "Please eat," she said softly, placing bowls in front of them. The men exchanged uncertain glances before lowering their heads in quiet thanks. One of them, a younger man with tattoos running up his neck, murmured, "It's been years since someone cooked for us." As they ate, their rough exteriors seemed to soften. Tae-hyun noticed a small framed photo on the shelf, a man in uniform holding Hwa-ja's hand. "Your husband?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "He always said warmth shared is warmth multiplied. Maybe that's why the fire never dies here." The men grew quiet. Outside, the storm raged, snow pounding against the windows. Inside, laughter began to ripple through the room. Stories followed, of roads traveled, mistakes made, dreams left behind. When night deepened, Hwa-ja laid out extra blankets. The bikers, humbled and drowsy, thanked her before falling asleep on the floor, their heavy breathing blending with the crackle of the fire. She sat watching them, 15 strangers now resting like suns beneath her roof. For the first time in years, her house didn't feel empty. It felt alive. When morning came, the world outside looked reborn. The storm had vanished, leaving behind a blanket of snow so pure it sparkled under the soft winter sun. Smoke rose lazily from the chimney as warmth lingered in the air. Hua stirred from her chair, the fire still burning low. Around her, the men began to wake, stretching, rubbing their eyes, and whispering greetings that felt strangely gentle coming from such rough voices. One by one, they folded their blankets and helped tidy the room without being asked. She smiled quietly to herself, pouring them each a cup of barley tea. "Drink before you go," she said. "The road will be slippery." They sat together one last time, sipping tea in the silence of morning. Taehyun stood and bowed deeply. "We will never forget you, Ajumeoni. You didn't even ask who we were, and still opened your door." Hua waved her hand dismissively, hiding the emotion in her eyes. "Because you were cold. That's all that mattered." They stepped outside to find their motorcycles half buried in snow. The men worked together, brushing them off, their laughter echoing down the quiet street. When the engines roared to life, the sound filled the village like thunder. Hua stood at her gate, her shawl fluttering in the wind. "Safe travels, my sons," she whispered as they rode away, a trail of tire marks cutting through the white road. She thought that was the end of it. But kindness, she would soon learn, never ends where you expect it to. The next morning began quietly. The sun shone weakly through the frosted windows, and Hua hummed to herself as she fed the sparrows outside her gate. The world felt still, peaceful, until the ground began to tremble beneath her feet. At first, she thought it was thunder rolling through the mountains. But the rumble grew louder, steadier, deeper. The cups on her shelf rattled, the birds scattered, and then she heard it, the unmistakable growl of engines, not one, not 10, far more. She stepped to the fence, clutching her shawl around her shoulders. Down the winding, snow-covered road, a line of motorcycles appeared, dozens at first, then more. Chrome flashed under the morning sun. The sound was overwhelming, a wave of power and purpose echoing through the valley. Villagers peeked from behind their windows, whispering nervously. But Hua didn't move. Her eyes widened as she realized who they were, the same men from that night, only now there were 100 of them. At the front rode Taehyun, the leader, his expression calm and grateful. When he stopped before her gate, he removed his gloves and reached into his coat. In his hands was a bouquet of bright red dongbek, winter camellias, impossible to find in this season. He bowed low. "Ajumeoni, we told our brothers what you did for us. You gave us warmth when the world turned away. We came to give a little back." Tears welled in Hua's eyes, her hands trembling as she accepted the flowers. "You already did," she whispered. But the day was just beginning, and the gift they brought was far more than flowers. Engines quieted as the bikers dismounted, boots crunching in the snow. Then one by one, they began unloading boxes from their bikes. Groceries, rice bags, winter blankets, even firewood stacked neatly into piles. Others carried tools, repairing the fence that leaned crooked near her gate. The air filled with the scent of gasoline, wood smoke, and laughter. Neighbors gathered at a distance, hesitant at first, but when they saw what the bikers were doing, fixing, shoveling, carrying, curiosity softened into awe. Some even joined in. An old farmer brought hot tea. A young woman from next door offered teok for everyone to share. Soon, Hua's quiet street had turned into a small festival of gratitude and warmth. Taehyun worked quietly, helping patch the hole in her roof. "You shouldn't have to face the winter alone," he said, handing her a small envelope. Inside were bills, a month's worth of heating money. "From everyone," he added before she could protest. Hua's eyes brimmed with tears. "I have nothing to give back," she whispered. He smiled softly. "You already did that night." Snow began to fall again, gentle this time, slow and bright. Hua looked around, the sound of laughter echoing through the cold. Her heart felt full, warm enough to melt even the thickest ice. "This warmth," she murmured, is worth more than gold. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel alone in her little home. She felt surrounded by life, by kindness, by family she never expected to find. As the sun began to set, the snow turned golden under its fading light. The bikers gathered in a line once more, their engines humming softly like a heartbeat beneath the quiet sky. The small village stood watching. The once feared strangers now embraced as heroes. Hwaja stood at her gate again, her hands still clutching the bouquet of winter camellias. Tae-hyun approached her one last time, his breath visible in the cold air. "We'll be on the road again, Ajumeoni," he said gently, "but we'll never forget this place, or you." She smiled, the corners of her eyes wrinkling. "Promise me one thing," she said. "What's that?" "When you see someone cold and lost like you were, open your door." "Don't let kindness stop here." Tae-hyun bowed deeply, the others following his lead. Then, with a roar that shook the valley, they mounted their bikes and rode off into the horizon, a streak of black leather and silver against the pale snow. Hwaja watched until the sound faded, leaving only silence and a single tire mark winding down the road. She turned back toward her home, the firelight flickering through the window. Inside, on her table, lay a small patch embroidered with the words, "Road Brothers, ride with honor." She pressed it to her heart, smiling through tears. "Ride safe, my sons," she whispered, and somewhere in the distance a faint echo of engines answered her. The screen fades into the image of Hwaja's empty diner that night, the wooden sign creaking softly in the wind. The camera lingers on the faint glow of the fireplace inside, and then slowly pans to the photograph hanging on the wall. Hwaja surrounded by the bikers, all smiling, their hands raised in salute. A soft voice speaks over the stillness, warm, trembling with emotion. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness can change 100 lives. Hwaja didn't know who they were, didn't ask where they came from. She just opened her door, and that was enough to start a chain of warmth that never ended. The image shifts to a slow montage, villagers rebuilding the diner together, a child hanging a sign that reads, "Kindness served here." The voice continues, so if you're watching this right now, maybe that's your sign. The world needs more doors that open, more hearts that listen, more people who care, even when it's hard. A soft piano plays as snow begins to fall again. Would you open your door for a stranger? Tell me in the comments below. I'd love to hear your heart. Pause. Then the final line. And if this story touched you, don't just scroll, share it. Because somewhere out there, a little kindness is waiting to begin again. The screen fades to black with the words, "Kindness never rides alone."